This video is sponsored by Surfshark.
This is the New York Times, 2018. Black men who attended religious services are 76% more likely to attain at least middle-class status than those who did not. Wow.
Oh boy, where do we start with this one, huh?
That's enormous.
Yes, Dennis, your error here is indeed enormous.
Wow.
Recently, we reviewed Dennis Prager's Master's program, and while we dealt with the bulk of his claims, you won't be surprised to hear that there's still an enormous number of errors that we had to omit.
Enormous.
But we always knew that from time to time, every once in a while, we'd have to return to the campus of alternative facts to deal with these errors, and today is one such time. During Dennis's segment on the insignificance of religion, he claims that adherence to religious beliefs is associated with enhanced social support, less substance abuse, and lower rates of psychopathology.
That's all. That's all religion gives you. Let's review that. Enhanced social support, less substance abuse, and lower rates of psychopathology. That's pretty powerful.
And then, with all the smugness you've just seen, Dennis accuses everyone who lives a secular life to be irrational. Indeed, he accuses us of rejecting religion based on emotional anger and brainwashing.
If after listening to these reasons, you still think it's a great idea to lead a secular life, there has to be a reason. It can't be that you have rationally concluded that. There must be some emotional anger or hostility to religion, or that you've been successfully brainwashed into believing that you are above religion. You don't need it. You do.
Yes, I know, I didn't have to play the full clip for you, but I hope you understand that I didn't want to be the only one experiencing emotional anger at witnessing an old man nodding along to his own nonsense. Now, we dealt with Dennis's shoddy academic approach in our episode titled Are Atheists Unhappy? We even exposed him for stitching together multiple studies to fit his narrative, but we thought we'd come back to address the one claim that we missed in that episode. Before that, though, I'd like to thank our sponsor. Surfshark VPN encrypts your internet traffic and masks your IP address. So whether you're streaming, gaming, or simply browsing the internet, your personal information is safe from prying eyes and hackers. Surfshark has servers all over the globe, meaning that if you want to access geo-restricted content that's only available to specific regions or countries, you can. Or let's say that you want to get cheaper flights. Well, by changing your virtual location, you might just find a better deal. Surfshark isn't just a VPN though. To name but a few of their add-ons, they have Surfshark Alert, which keeps track of data breaches, and Surfshark Antivirus, which keeps your devices protected from online threats. Now, here's the best part. There's no risk in trying Surfshark VPN since they offer a 30-day money-back guarantee. So, if you're not completely satisfied, you can get your money back, no questions asked. You can also get, by using the code RATIONALITY, an extra 3 months for free. Yeah, that's right, 3 months on top of the already amazing service they provide. So, what are you waiting for? Take control of your online security and unlock a world of possibilities with Surfshark VPN. And once you've done that, come back to me as we unlock a world of nonsense with Dennis.
This is the New York Times, 2018. Black men who attended religious services are 76% more likely to attain at least middle-class status than those who did not. Wow. 76% more likely to rise socioeconomically, which generally is associated with some increase in happiness. That's enormous. If people were not brainwashed into thinking religion is awful and is for dummies, religion would be the first thing every single pro-human, anti-depression group would advocate. It is the single best answer.
Alrighty, let's begin by getting all the pieces on the table. The ground floor is a study conducted by the American Enterprise Institute, AEI, titled Black Men Making It in America. The second layer is an opinion piece by David Brooks for the New York Times, titled The Quiet Death of Racial Progress. And the third layer is Dennis.
You don't need it.
No, we don't need you, Dennis, but we do have you, and we're going to have to deal with you. So let's take Dennis's assertion and see whether his sources back him up. First off, note that Dennis is making a very substantial claim here. He presents this information in the context of arguing why we should attend church or a synagogue, and he's clearly arguing that the reason black men have risen socioeconomically is because of their adherence to religious beliefs. Put otherwise, according to Dennis, adherence to religion is the cause.
It's pretty powerful.
But does the opinion piece that Dennis references actually support his claim of religious adherence being the cause? The answer is no. Shock, horror, I know, unbelievable. The opinion piece merely presents the statistic of black men who attended religious services being 76% more likely to attain middle-class status. Nowhere does the author explicitly state that religious adherence is the cause of the socio-economic rise. Nor does the author say that attendance is the cause. So, unlike Dennis, the author doesn't commit a false cause fallacy. On both accounts, Dennis's source doesn't support him. In fact, the author actually spends a decent amount of time considering the actual underlying causes. For example, within the same paragraph that Dennis quotes, the author states, "Conservatives are right to point out the importance of bourgeois norms. That is, the cultural and behavioural expectations associated with and approved by those with money," which, in the United States, has been and still is the military, marriage, and church. Or to give another instance of the author contradicting Dennis's narrative, let's scroll up by just one paragraph. The author states, "Left-wingers have it correct when they point to systems of oppression that pervade society. The legacy of residential segregation, the racist attitudes in the workplace that demonstrably make it much harder for African American men to get jobs, the prejudices in the schools, in the streets and in the judicial system that make it much more likely that African American males will be punished, incarcerated and marginalized." Hence, far from the one-dimensional view of religious adherence being the cause of black men reaching middle-class status, the author paints a complicated picture of systemic proportion, emphasizing the legacy of segregation and the influence and preferences of those with money, which includes, of course, immensely rich religious institutions. Before moving on, let's approach this from an analogous angle. Study after study after study reveals that the more educated and intelligent someone is, the less likely they are to be religious.
Religion is awful and is for dummies.
Now, if we were to indulge in Dennis's modus operandi, then we'd look at these statistics, be amazed, and then claim that if people weren't brainwashed into thinking that religion is good for them, then leaving religion would be the first thing that every single pro-education and anti-dumb group would advocate.
It is the single best answer.
To go further with this analogy, there is an element of correlation in both cases. Just as, when in a religious country, attending religious services increases one's opportunities and support network, which in turn likely leads to an increase in socio-economic standing, attending higher education increases one's ability to recognize and critically examine religious issues, which in turn likely leads to an increase in deconversion. There is, indeed, a correlation, but just as it's obviously a mistake to draw a cause and effect relationship between education and religious disbelief, it's likewise an obvious mistake to draw a cause and effect relationship between attending religious services and socio-economic status. Being educated doesn't cause you to become non-religious. No, it simply equips you with the means to become non-religious. Likewise, adhering or attending a church doesn't cause you to rise socio-economically. No, in countries in which religion dominates, attending religious services grants you opportunities that allow you to rise socio-economically. Alright, so Dennis commits a false cause fallacy, but what about the opinion piece? Does the report from AEI support the author's claim? Well, if we look at the page the opinion piece links to, it states, black men who frequently attended church services at a young age are also more likely to reach the middle class or higher when they are in their 50s. 53% of those men who attended church as young men made it, compared to 43% who did not. And they further clarify this observation in their report. Black men who regularly attended religious services at a young age were 76% more likely than those who did not to attain at least middle-class status 35 years later. So while the author of the opinion piece claims that black men who attended religious services are 76% more likely to attain at least middle-class status than those who did not, the report they reference makes clear that this applies specifically to black men who are now in their 50s. What's more, it's crucial to acknowledge that the report highlights the significant societal changes that have occurred in the United States over the past century, which have directly influenced the opportunities available to black individuals. I mean, let's not forget that just over half a century ago, the US enforced a system of racial segregation. The changes that have occurred since then have not, of course, removed the systemic problems. Far from it, but they have, at least in places, reduced the barriers. The report emphasises, for example, that while in 1960 just 38% of black men were in the middle class or higher, as of 2016 it's 57%. This is still way below white men, but it's certainly a significant improvement. Couple this with the facts that we spoke about in our series, such as that those who attend religious services tend to be more socially active than those who don't, that those who share the same religious or irreligious views as their parents, whatever they might be, report greater mental health, and that the associations discussed are not replicated in secular societies, then Dennis's low-resolution perspective utterly falls apart. Prescribing recommendations for black individuals today based on a very different society that existed 35 years ago is incredibly misguided. The landscape has evolved, and it is essential to take into account the progress made as well as the persistent barriers that still exist. And I'd argue that the selected words that Dennis references from the opinion piece fails to convey this context. But man, this is a full-fledged documentary he made, complete with bells and whistles. You'd like to think that Dennis would at least read the study, or at least the abstract, or at least the opinion piece, or at least the paragraph above what he quotes. But no.
Well, that's all.
Yeah, we know that's all, Dennis. That's all we get when a zealot twists facts. We're used to it by now, but it still sucks. Now, one of the reasons I think this error from Dennis has been worth tackling is because when one oversimplifies a complex issue, they strip away the depth required to address the issue effectively. Real-world problems rarely have straightforward solutions that can be neatly attributed to a single factor, like religion in this case. By reducing the complexity to a single cause, people like Dennis create a distorted and incomplete picture that fails to capture the multitude of factors at play, and that's not just foolish, but dangerous. Dennis's one-dimensional take oversimplifies the challenges that black people face in the United States, ignoring the systemic factors that contribute to racial disparities. By solely attributing the higher likelihood of black men attaining middle-class status to religious adherence, he overlooks the multitude of social, economic, and historical factors that impact the lives of black individuals. This narrow perspective undermines efforts to address systemic racism and inequality. It fails to recognize the structural barriers and discrimination that many black individuals experience, such as unequal access to quality education, employment opportunities, and equitable treatment within institutions. You know, just like the opinion piece and report say.
If people were not brainwashed into thinking religion is awful and is for dummies, religion would be the first thing every single pro-human, anti-depression group would advocate.
And if people were not brainwashed into thinking that Dennis is intelligent, terminating their subscription to PragerU and the Daily Wire is the first thing they'd advocate. No, wait, it's not. They subscribe for confirmation bias. He's just fine. He has no... That's the problem. He has no capitalistic incentive to not say stupid things. Anyhow, that will do it for today. Thank you kindly for the view, and an extra special thank you to my wonderful patrons and YouTube members. Cheers, my dears. We couldn't do it without you.